Chicken Little knew something was wrong the moment the acorn struck her head. It wasn't much, just a tiny tap, but enough to make her look up. She saw cracks spreading across the sky and panicked. Alarmed, she ran to warn her friends. Henny Penny, Goosey Lucy and Turkey Lurkey didn't believe her at first. After all, the sky had always been there, steady and secure. But Chicken Little's fear was contagious, and soon they too were certain disaster was falling from above. Together, they rushed to tell the king. But the sky wasn't falling. It never had been. Chicken Little had misidentified the threat. Something had startled her, but it wasn't the heavens coming apart. It was an acorn, small and ordinary, mistaken for something far worse. That was the first mistake, failing to recognize the true nature of the threat. But the second mistake was far more dangerous. Before they could deliver their warning, Chicken Little and her friends met Foxy Loxy. Foxy Loxy didn't argue or dismiss their fear. He encouraged it, playing along just long enough to earn their trust. Then, under the guise of helping them, he led them straight into his den, where their warning and their lives came to an abrupt end. The story doesn't end in tragedy because Chicken Little panicked. It ends in tragedy because no one stopped to ask the right questions. Chicken Little misread the warning, and her friends followed the loudest voice instead of the wisest one. The real danger wasn't overhead. It was walking beside them, feeding on their confusion. This is the Chicken Little challenge. The hardest task isn't just knowing that something is wrong, it's understanding what is wrong and why. Today's world faces mounting risks, subtle numeric instabilities creeping quietly through the systems we trust most. Planes falter, rockets explode, and power grids collapse, not from obvious breakdowns, but from errors too small to see until they spiral out of control. The danger isn't imaginary, but if we mistake its nature, or worse, let others control the narrative, we risk following the wrong guide straight into disaster. The challenge before us isn't just to see that something has fallen, it's to recognize what it means, before Foxy Loxy turns panic into opportunity. Something is wrong in the sky. In the first quarter of 2025 alone, commercial aviation has suffered a wave of disasters and near misses that have left investigators scrambling for answers. From South Korea to Philadelphia, Nome to Toronto, jets have crashed on landing, caught fire at the gate, flipped upside down on the tarmac, collided in midair, and simply vanished from radar. On January 29th, a Jeju Air flight slammed into the runway at Muan International Airport, killing 174 people, the worst single airline disaster in a decade. Just one day earlier, another South Korean carrier, Air Busan, had to evacuate its passengers moments before takeoff due to a sudden onboard fire. On the same day as the Jeju crash, over Washington, D.C., an American regional jet collided mid-air with a Black Hawk helicopter in controlled airspace. 3 major accidents, 2 countries, 24 hours. The tragedies continued. In Philadelphia, a medevac Learjet crashed in flames just seconds after takeoff. In Alaska, a commuter plane disappeared over sea ice, its wreckage found days later with no survivors. In Toronto, a Delta regional jet landed in crosswinds and flipped on its back. And in Honduras, a small turboprop plunged into the ocean just after departure, killing everyone on board. These were not all the same kind of aircraft, or the same manufacturers, or the same airlines. They weren't even operating under the same regulatory regimes. But they share something far more important than any of those details. They all failed within systems that were supposed to be safe. These were not prototype aircraft, or planes flying in war zones. These were passenger and medical transport flights on routine missions, cleared by control towers, operating under normal conditions. Yet again and again, something subtle and cumulative pushed these systems over the edge. Something that could not be caught by ordinary inspection. And while investigators point to proximate causes, wind shear, bird strikes, engine failure, human error, the broader pattern is undeniable. It is as if the air itself has grown more dangerous, as if the margin for error is collapsing from all directions. The sky is vibrating, drifting, and misaligning in ways we do not yet fully understand. And the price of that misunderstanding is being measured in lives. As aviation reeled from an unprecedented wave of failures in early 2025, a parallel drama was unfolding on the new frontier of spaceflight, equally troubling and equally misunderstood. At its center stood SpaceX's Starship program, a triumph of modern engineering ambition, suddenly confronted by its own pattern of dramatic and explosive failures. On January 16, 2025, Starship Flight Test 7 erupted in a spectacular mid-air explosion above the Turks and Caicos Islands, scattering flaming debris over hundreds of square miles of Caribbean waters and populated islands, reaching as far as Puerto Rico and the British Virgin Islands. In March, Flight Test 8 repeated the disaster, breaking apart on atmospheric re-entry and showering wreckage across Florida and the Bahamas. Commercial airspace shut down abruptly, leaving nearly 500 flights grounded or diverted, and tens of thousands of travelers stranded. Yet the reaction was astonishingly muted. Though cleanup efforts quietly unfolded, the public and media response was carefully managed. Official narratives framed these catastrophic explosions as expected learning experiences, unavoidable in the pursuit of innovation. Behind the scenes, powerful economic incentives and regulatory capture quietly influenced oversight. Critics pointed to the FAA's increasingly lenient stance towards SpaceX, accelerated investigation timelines, and minimal interruption of testing schedules, even after repeated, visible public harm. The company's crucial role in NASA's Artemis missions further insulated it, ensuring continued political goodwill and regulatory leniency. Local communities near Boca Chica, Texas, voiced unease about continual testing and debris hazards. Environmentalists warned of chemical pollution and habitat destruction from scattered debris. Airlines counted millions in losses from flight disruptions. But still, rockets launched. Systems were recalibrated, regulations eased. The inertia of scientific ambition, economic urgency, and captured regulatory oversight pushed relentlessly forward, reinforcing one another in a dangerous triad that masked the fundamental fragility of these engineered systems. And again, beneath the surface spectacle and carefully managed narratives lay a haunting familiarity. Just like the aircraft failures before them, Starship vehicles weren't failing because of isolated, obvious engineering mistakes. They exploded in midair, despite each individual subsystem being certified safe. Engines performed according to specification. Structural integrity was within parameters. Flight software showed no alarming anomalies. Yet somewhere, subtly, cumulative numeric errors, small distortions from digital approximations of structural and harmonic interactions, built silently toward catastrophic failure. Reports from internal engineering teams privately acknowledged unexpected harmonic responses, a careful euphemism for resonances and feedback loops that designers hadn't anticipated and simulations hadn't captured. These harmonic failures revealed a profound misalignment between the digital models engineers trusted and the physical realities they were attempting to control. And still, no fundamental reassessment emerged. No pause to reconsider the systemic math underpinning these machines. Instead, SpaceX pushed harder, faster, further, full steam ahead down a track whose instability remained invisible to their models. Then, suddenly, it wasn't just planes or rockets. It was an entire city. In late March, just weeks after Starship debris had been cleared from Florida beaches, Europe's busiest airport plunged abruptly into darkness. A single transformer fire at Heathrow International Airport triggered cascading blackouts, grounding all flights and stranding hundreds of thousands of travelers. Digital monitoring systems, trusted implicitly, had ignored subtle warning signs. Small numerical approximations in sensor data about transformer temperatures and electrical loads, previously dismissed as insignificant, quietly compounded and multiplied through automated decisions. The digital models had assured operators everything was within acceptable bounds, right up until the moment it catastrophically wasn't. Urgent to restore normalcy, Heathrow rushed through emergency fixes, rebooting systems without careful reassessment. Regulators encouraged swift recovery, airlines demanded it, governments insisted upon it. The underlying cause, fragile numerical approximations amplified through interconnected digital and physical layers, was quickly lost in the race back to normal. As aircraft once more began taking off, and power flickered back into terminals, the illusion of restored stability settled back into place. Yet what seemed like a rapid recovery was in reality a desperate patch, a rushed fix atop hidden fractures. The consequences were not resolved, only deferred, quietly rippling outward, invisible stresses transferred into global aviation, communications, supply chains, and energy systems. The deeper truth remained unspoken, unaddressed. Digital approximations had quietly undermined systems we trusted with our lives. And as Heathrow hurriedly returned to business as usual, no one paused to ask, What invisible stresses had we just unleashed into the global network? And where would they strike next? When systems fail, engineers respond with the tools they know best: diagnostics, refinement, control. They review logs, rerun simulations, and then do what seems most logical. They tighten the tolerances. If a heat sensor misreads by 0.5 degrees, the solution is to increase its resolution. If vibration thresholds are being crossed unexpectedly, the system is recalibrated to account for more decimal places. If software feedback loops misbehave, the update frequency is doubled. The assumption is clear and deeply rooted. More precision leads to more accuracy, and more accuracy leads to stability. It's the rational response. It's also catastrophically misguided. This is the precision trap, a self-reinforcing engineering reflex that mistakes apparent control for true fidelity. And it's precisely how modern aerospace and infrastructure systems are marching deeper into fragility, armed with nothing but a longer ruler and the conviction that if they measure finely enough, the system will behave. But this belief breaks down at the root, because it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Precision is not the same as correctness. Decimal-based digital systems don't simulate reality directly, they approximate it. Floating point representations cannot hold exact values for pi, the square root of 2, or even many common trigonometric expressions. Instead, they store the closest possible binary value that fits within a fixed number of bits. This means that every single calculation involving these constants, angles, curves, harmonic oscillations, temperature shifts, rotations, begins with error baked in. More digits only push the error out further. They never erase it. In small isolated calculations, this doesn't matter. In spreadsheets or static models, rounding errors are harmless. But in systems governed by feedback loops, resonance, and phase sensitivity, such as aircraft undergoing cyclic stress, rockets under dynamic loads, or power grids maintaining synchronous frequency, these tiny inaccuracies don't just persist, they compound, they amplify, they feed back into themselves in ways that no amount of decimal padding can prevent. This is why rockets explode even when every subsystem is within spec, why planes suffer vibration fatigue despite passing simulations, why transformers fail even when temperature logs are normal. The model doesn't match reality, not because the model is coarse, but because it is built on a mathematical framework that cannot express the very relationships the system depends on. And so the engineering response, tightening tolerances, increasing decimal places, refining simulations, is not a solution. It is a deeper commitment to a flawed system. It's doubling down on a blind spot. What's worse, the more these approximations are buried under layers of higher resolution abstraction, the more invisible they become. Engineers begin to trust their models more than the physical systems they're simulating. The illusion grows stronger even as the underlying coherence quietly erodes. This isn't negligence, it's a systemic misunderstanding, and it explains why, across domains, aviation, spaceflight, energy infrastructure, we are seeing failures that emerge not from one mistake, but from 1,000 small, insignificant approximations colliding at the wrong moment. Until we confront this, no amount of tolerance tightening will save us. At the heart of modern engineering lies a quiet contradiction, one hiding in plain sight. For decades, engineers have assumed that increased numerical precision would naturally translate into greater accuracy, reliability, and stability. Digital computing made this assumption seem self-evident. After all, computers can effortlessly handle vast strings of decimals, seemingly limitless detail and resolution. But beneath the reassuring surface of infinite decimal expansion, our computational foundations conceal a deep and insidious flaw. The flaw begins with a simple truth. Irrational and transcendental numbers can never be exactly represented by decimal approximations. Numbers like pi, phi, and fundamental trigonometric constants, critical to every complex system from aircraft wings to rocket guidance to power grid frequencies, are inherently irrational. In a finite digital environment, they must be approximated, rounded, truncated, and stored within limited precision. The value stored is not pi itself, but an approximation, close, yet not exact. And no matter how many decimal places you include, that fundamental gap never vanishes. It merely shrinks, hidden within increasingly subtle tolerances. But why should such infinitesimal errors matter? After all, a difference of a billionth of a decimal point seems inconsequential. Here lies the critical misunderstanding. These tiny hidden errors do not vanish, they accumulate. In static calculations, such approximations might never emerge. But modern engineered systems are dynamic, feedback-driven, and interconnected. They rely explicitly on harmonic integrity, precise ratios, exact frequencies, carefully synchronized phases. Each iteration, each feedback cycle, each subsequent computation takes the previous approximation as its new baseline. Errors feed into errors, magnify one another, and silently compound over thousands, even millions, of cycles. Thus, these invisible inaccuracies cascade through complex interactions. In aircraft structures, slight numerical distortions in resonance modeling subtly shift the prediction of fatigue points, causing unexpected structural failures years down the line. In rockets, harmonic interactions between engines and fuel flows become misaligned by fractional approximations, eventually causing catastrophic resonance-induced explosions mid-flight. On power grids, frequency measurements relying on floating-point arithmetic become subtly inaccurate, drifting gradually until a tipping point is reached and entire grids collapse into cascading blackouts. The danger isn't just that these errors accumulate, it's that our systems have no mechanism to detect or correct these invisible drifts. Digital monitoring and simulation, built on the same flawed foundation, inherently trust the very approximations causing instability. Systems accept their own distorted internal models as reality, making corrections and decisions based on flawed data, amplifying error rather than containing it. Engineers, believing they are adding precision and control, unwittingly deepen their reliance on an illusory mathematical structure. This illusion is deadly precisely because it's so convincing. Aircraft simulations look accurate, rocket telemetry seems reliable. Grid management dashboards display perfectly smooth curves. Yet the gap between model and reality persists, invisible and relentless, undermining safety margins until catastrophic failure emerges out of nowhere. Each failure becomes a puzzle, investigators scouring for mechanical faults or human mistakes, rarely suspecting the foundational mathematics itself. The solution is not finer decimals. The solution is to abandon decimals as the primary framework altogether. What's needed instead is a fundamental shift in how we represent numeric relationships within engineered systems, a shift toward ratio-based computation. Ratios, exact relationships expressed as fractions or integer multiples, are inherently stable, precise, and immune to rounding or approximation errors. Ratios preserve exact harmonic relationships, ensuring system coherence across scales and over time. Instead of a floating-point approximation of pi, a system could model its structural harmonics and rotational cycles as precise integer proportions. Frequencies, structural resonances, fuel mixture ratios, grid synchronization signals, all could be represented as exact ratios, rather than floating-point approximations. This shift would transform our approach to engineering at a foundational level, restoring true coherence to our critical systems. Aircraft structures would resonate predictably, not unpredictably. Rockets would operate harmonically, not explosively. Grids would maintain synchronization reliably, rather than spiraling into chaos at tiny numeric disturbances. We are currently trapped by the illusion of precision. Only by embracing a fundamentally different computational paradigm, one based on exact numerical relationships rather than decimal approximations, can we escape that trap. This is not merely an optimization or incremental refinement. It's a revolution in how we build, model, and manage the engineered world. And the cost of ignoring it is no longer theoretical. It's measured in human lives, billions of dollars, and a growing sense of collective uncertainty about the infrastructure upon which civilization depends. When crisis strikes, aircraft disasters, rocket explosions, or power grid failures, the engineering world mobilizes immediately. Teams of experts gather, investigations begin, and new procedures are swiftly implemented. But despite these well-intentioned reactions, our conventional engineering responses share a critical flaw. Each solution implicitly doubles down on the same flawed mathematical foundation that created the original instability. Rather than addressing the root cause, decimal-based approximation, these responses perpetuate and deepen the systemic risk, locking us into a destructive cycle of failure, reaction, and deeper hidden instability. Consider aviation first. After every tragic accident, aviation authorities respond predictably. Sensors are recalibrated, structural simulations run at higher resolution, and regulatory bodies mandate tighter tolerances in aircraft manufacturing and maintenance standards. New rules multiply decimal precision in flight control systems, vibration monitoring, and aerodynamic modeling. On the surface, these measures seem prudent, but underneath, Each tightening of tolerance narrows the margin between the digitally approximated reality and the physical reality of flight dynamics. Ironically, as simulations become more detailed, their invisible approximation errors multiply, quietly propagating and intensifying harmonic instabilities. Each iterative increase in numeric precision deepens the engineer's belief in their model's accuracy, even as that accuracy subtly slips away. In aerospace, SpaceX's explosive Starship failures demonstrate the same flawed cycle. After each highly visible disaster, SpaceX intensifies scrutiny on subsystem components, fuel pumps, structural welds, software algorithms, each time requiring more precise numeric controls and narrower operational parameters. Regulators, anxious to avoid public criticism yet wary of slowing critical national programs, endorse incremental improvements. But tightening decimal-based specifications, from thrust vector alignment to fuel flow rates, actually increases susceptibility to cumulative approximation errors, especially within the rocket's highly sensitive harmonic environment. Engineers tighten numeric limits, assured of increased safety, but unknowingly strengthen the illusion of precision. Each subsequent explosion thus becomes more baffling, intensifying public anxiety, regulatory paralysis, and economic pressure to get it right quickly, leading to yet another tightening cycle with no meaningful reassessment of the foundational mathematical flaw. The same destructive cycle unfolds in our electrical grid infrastructure. After events like Heathrow's catastrophic blackout, power grid engineers rush to deploy additional digital sensors, upgrade software control algorithms, and mandate increasingly stringent numerical standards for frequency control and load balancing. More decimal places are added to frequency measurements. Faster automated feedback loops are implemented, and more computationally complex models are introduced. Again, this reaction appears logical and rational. Yet beneath each refinement, the foundational numeric approximation errors quietly multiply. Faster reaction loops compound rounding errors more rapidly. Higher resolution numeric standards hide instability deeper within system interactions. Each incremental improvement magnifies rather than reduces the systemic risk, fueling the cycle of hidden fragility, until the next even larger failure emerges. Critically, these domains don't fail in isolation. Instead, failures in aviation ripple into aerospace and grid infrastructure, and vice versa. Starship explosions close airspace and disrupt commercial aviation routes, cascading delays that ripple through an already fragile global aviation network. Heathrow's blackout strands tens of thousands of travelers, overloading adjacent airports and airline operations, triggering rushed repairs and regulatory shortcuts. Each failure increases urgency for rapid fixes, pushing systems back into operation prematurely, creating hidden stresses that propagate globally, intensifying interactions and pressures across seemingly unrelated domains. Together, aviation, aerospace, and electrical grids form a deeply interconnected triad of systemic vulnerability. And at each node, conventional engineering responses, tightening decimal-based tolerances, and increasing numeric complexity strengthen not stability, but fragility. Each solution makes the systems more reliant on flawed decimal approximations, compounding future risks, and pushing us closer to catastrophic tipping points. It's a paradox. The harder engineers work to make their systems numerically precise, the more they embed instability deep within them. The cycle is self-reinforcing, driven by regulatory inertia, economic urgency, and scientific pride, locking society into a dangerously unstable equilibrium. Unless we recognize and break this cycle, further disasters are not merely possible, they're mathematically inevitable. The painful truth we must acknowledge is that our engineering culture, policy frameworks, and economic incentives are all structured around this illusion of precision. Breaking free requires more than incremental change. It demands a complete reassessment of how we model, simulate, and manage complexity itself. But what would such a revolutionary shift look like in practice? The disasters we face today, jets falling from the sky, rockets exploding unpredictably, power grids collapsing without clear warning, are not random accidents. They are symptoms of a deeper, systemic illness, rooted in the very mathematics we rely upon to understand and manage complexity. Our conventional engineering responses, doubling down on decimal precision and tightening numeric tolerances, have repeatedly failed, not despite their rigor, but because of it. It's time for a revolution, not merely in how precisely we measure, but in the very foundations of how we represent reality mathematically. The solution is clear, but it requires a paradigm shift away from decimal approximation and toward ratio-based computation. Unlike decimals, ratios, expressed as exact fractions and integer relationships, capture the true harmonic integrity and exact proportions inherent in complex systems. Ratios represent relationships exactly, without approximation or rounding. They preserve coherence across iterative processes, maintain stability through repeated feedback loops, and eliminate hidden cumulative errors. In short, ratios offer precisely the stable mathematical foundation that decimal approximation fundamentally cannot provide. Imagine aircraft whose structural harmonics are modeled not as decimal approximations of trigonometric values, but as exact integer ratios, ensuring vibrations align harmonically rather than destructively. Consider rocket engines whose thrust, fuel flow, and structural dynamics operate in exact numeric harmony, preventing the subtle numeric drift that leads to catastrophic explosions. Envision power grids whose frequency synchronization is governed by precise numeric relationships, rather than digital approximations prone to cascading errors. In each domain, a ratio-based mathematical foundation would not merely improve resilience, it would fundamentally eliminate the numeric instability that now invisibly threatens us all. Shifting to this ratio-based paradigm is not just a theoretical ideal, it's a practical necessity. It requires re-engineering computational platforms to prioritize rational arithmetic and exact integer relationships. It demands new educational standards, training engineers and mathematicians not merely to approximate, but to think explicitly in terms of proportion and harmony. Regulatory and safety standards would evolve from specifying narrower decimal tolerances to specifying exact numeric relationships, inherently embedding structural stability into every critical engineered system. But the greatest challenge is not technological, it's cultural. Regulators, engineers, and industry leaders must confront the uncomfortable reality that decades of numeric precision have been built on an unstable foundation. We must reject the seductive illusion of infinite decimal control and replace it with the humbler, but infinitely safer, practice of exact numeric proportionality. This means confronting entrenched economic incentives, regulatory inertia, and professional pride, all deeply invested in the status quo. Yet the urgency is undeniable. To continue down the path of decimal approximation is to knowingly embrace catastrophic failure as inevitable. We have already glimpsed the consequences: lives lost in preventable aviation disasters, billions squandered on exploding rockets, global disruption from seemingly inexplicable power grid failures. How many more warnings must we endure before we acknowledge the common denominator, our mathematics itself? The ratio revolution begins not with better computers, but with clearer thinking, an acknowledgement that true precision lies in exact numeric relationships, not endless decimal expansions. We must reject the failing legacy of approximation and embrace a future of explicit proportional harmony. The stability of our aircraft, our rockets, our electrical grids, and ultimately the infrastructure of our civilization itself depends on it. The moment for incremental improvements has passed. The choice before us is clear and stark. Continue spiraling deeper into hidden numeric instability, or embrace the ratio revolution, securing a safer, genuinely resilient, engineered future. The next disaster may not offer another chance. Chicken Little was misunderstood, not because he lacked insight, but because his message challenged everything his community believed to be stable and true. Like Chicken Little, your role in the national security live-action roleplay, NSLARP, is uniquely challenging. You're tasked not simply with raising an alarm, but with inspiring a deep paradigm-level shift in how our society understands and responds to invisible threats. The numeric instabilities we've explored, quietly accumulating beneath aviation, aerospace, and critical infrastructure, continue precisely because our dominant narratives remain reassuring, entrenched, and dangerously incomplete. Your goal is not to patch individual cracks in the sky, but rather to lead the broader community toward recognizing that the very foundations of our engineered sky are failing. First comes identification, like Chicken Little. Feeling that tiny fragment fall from above, your mission begins with noticing subtle anomalies that others overlook. Successful identification requires a keen sensitivity to systemic fragility, recognizing that these dangerous instabilities manifest first as subtle irregularities, small numerical errors, and seemingly inconsequential patterns in data that engineers, administrators, and the public readily dismiss. You must embody Chicken Little's courage in naming these concerns publicly, even when others initially doubt your perspective. Within NSLARP's fully immersive environment, open to participants from all backgrounds, your awareness can grow collectively sharper as diverse participants share clues, connect seemingly isolated events, and reinforce one another's emerging awareness. Remember, Chicken Little's strength lay not in authority or expertise, but in perception, curiosity, and courage to speak clearly about dangers others had missed. Yet awareness alone is insufficient. The next critical stage is interpretation. Chicken Little's failure was not sensing danger, but communicating its meaning effectively to Henny Penny, Turkey Lurkey, Goosey Lucy, and the wider community. Your success depends upon transforming complex technical and mathematical insights into stories comprehensible across all narrative layers, public, academic, and administrative alike. These narratives must clearly illustrate how seemingly minor numeric distortions in digital approximations inevitably cascade through interconnected systems, amplifying quietly until catastrophic failures emerge unexpectedly. Within the immersive role-playing context of NSLARP, every participant becomes both storyteller and interpreter, collectively reframing technical complexities into narratives that resonate widely, bridging gaps in understanding across diverse stakeholders. By ensuring that your interpretations clearly illuminate hidden interconnections and systemic vulnerabilities, you transform isolated warnings into compelling calls to collective action. Finally comes your greatest challenge. Influence. Chicken Little's tragic failure, one you must consciously avoid, was allowing Foxy Loxy to hijack the narrative, exploiting fear, confusion, and complacency. Your task, therefore, involves shaping narratives strategically and persistently across public, academic, and administrative domains, recognizing that influencing at only one level risks allowing entrenched powers to regain control. Influence within NSLARP emerges organically, driven not by authoritative prescriptions, but by the collective momentum of shared understanding. Rather than prescribing solutions from above, your narratives must clearly reveal the foundational numeric flaws of current engineering paradigms, empowering communities of engaged citizens to independently demand and pursue a shift toward ratio-based numeric foundations. Influence arises when the narrative of numeric instability and the urgent need for a fundamental mathematical revolution becomes widely understood, independently amplified, and culturally undeniable. Above all, the essence of your mission within the NSLARP environment is to foster emergent understanding, to ensure that communities do not merely recognize isolated instances of falling sky, but fully comprehend that the sky's very foundations have grown unstable. Your success will manifest when decentralized yet aligned narratives emerge naturally from diverse participants, reinforcing one another to break the dominant paradigm's comforting illusions. Like Chicken Little, you cannot compel the world to believe the sky is falling. You must enable the world itself to recognize that the sky's foundations were always precarious, built upon dangerously unstable numeric approximations. This realization, emerging organically from ordinary citizens, scholars, administrators, and industry experts alike, will catalyze the needed paradigm shift. Chicken Little's task was enormous, misunderstood, and undeniably daunting, just like yours. Yet within NSLARP's immersive, participatory framework, you have a powerful advantage Chicken Little lacked: the collective wisdom and collaborative energy of an open, engaged community dedicated to shared discovery and collective influence. By harnessing this decentralized potential, you become not one voice crying out alone, but part of a growing chorus. Too compelling, too clear, and ultimately too numerous for Foxy Loxy's dominant narrative to silence. The sky truly is falling. Your greatest achievement will be ensuring that, this time, the world listens, not merely to panic, but to act decisively, abandoning the illusion of decimal precision and embracing a stable foundation built on genuine numeric harmony.